One, two, three, four, five.
Hi, my name is Rodney Green, and I'll be discussing some of the main ideas regarding the migrant crisis in Europe right now. So, basically, NBC News says that according to the United Nations Refugee Agency, almost 750,000 migrants are making their way into Europe this year. So, migration at this scale and rate could bring a lot of unforeseen problems to these countries and other countries as well. As migration from the Middle East, Africa, and Asia increases, that may force some of these European countries to kind of close off their borders indefinitely as well, or completely, to better preserve their security and accountability. Tonight, I'll be discussing the summit of the European Union and African leaders, Sweden's new border control measures, and then also some of the other precautions that some of the other European countries are taking to kind of combat this migrant crisis in the last couple of weeks. So BBC News, in regards to the summit of the European Union and African leaders that was held this week, they mentioned that it was planned after 800 migrants from Africa died after their boat sank off the coast of Libya in April. And their whole focus was to, in their own words, find the root of causes that kind of created this migration. So the European Union agreed to a fund of 1.8 billion euros to help Africa out, and the African leaders disagreed, and they figured that it was an insufficient amount. Now keep in mind that 150,000 people migrated from Africa this year. Sweden put temporary border controls in effect to limit the number of migrants entering Sweden. And those measures will last about 10 days, but keep in mind that all they're really doing is kind of spot checking cars and buses. They're not really checking everyone. It's just to make sure that the wrong people don't enter their country. Now, 200,000 people, migrants, are expected to enter Sweden this year alone. That's more than any other EU country. Swedish Interior Minister Anders Ygeman stated that the controls were solely implemented to attain security and stability. Now, other countries are also tightening their borders as well. For instance, Hungary has already done it, and then Slovenia is building a 78 miles of concertina wire fences. And that's basically to create choke points for all the migrants coming from Croatia. So this will greatly diminish the avenues for those migrants to take, and it'll make it a lot more organized for Slovenia at least to handle. Now, Croatia doesn't like this because they think that they're kind of intruding on their lands, but at the same time, Slovenia is only doing it because they're so overwhelmed with the 180,000 people that are kind of filing into Slovenia itself, just to kind of use it as a portway to get to the Western European countries. ABC News said that despite the influx and pledges of action, EU nations have been slow to act. A plan to share the 160,000 migrants from Italy to Greece has barely gotten underway. So basically, the other countries have kind of banded together and promised Greece and Italy, who are taking a lot of the African migrants from the Mediterranean Sea, and they haven't really acted very much on that. Besides that, migrants are kind of stuck in Nikol, Russia. It's a city in Russia, and there's about 500 as of this article from NBC News, and basically they're stuck there because they don't have visas to get to any of the other parts of Europe, and then they also don't have transportation because all of the migrants that came before them already snagged up all of the bikes and cars and all that jazz to make it into, say, Norway, a place that you absolutely need a visa to get into. Now, the taxi drivers and bus drivers won't take them into Norway because they don't have any documentation, any visas. And if they did, then the Norwegians would confiscate their credentials, and then they wouldn't have any jobs or anything like that. So there's a pretty big penalty for doing that. Now, also want to mention that that's it. So basically tonight I talked about the summit of the European Union and African leaders, Sweden's border control measures, and a few other precautions taken to handle the European migration crisis. As migration from the Middle East, Africa, and Asia increases, European countries will may be forced to close off their borders to better preserve their security and accountability. And the question is, if the EU advocates humanitarian aid, what happens if they too need humanitarian aid? Thank you.